So welcome. We are talking about PowerPoint for graphic design. And I always love talking about this topic because I think it appeals to a very large audience. Whether you are working in e-learning, whether you work in instructional design and you're doing classroom training, whether you just simply create presentations or you create documentation or whatever it is that you do. I always love talking about this. And the reason why it is because if you work in the training or the learning and development and communications industry, which we all do, you probably use PowerPoint on a regular basis, and you probably have some sort of graphic design need that you need to fill with whatever it is you're doing. Again, whether you're creating an e-learning course, a presentation, a document, and I've worked in roles where I've done all of that. Graphic design is a very integral part of that. And I always like talking about this and starting this presentation off by asking, why is graphic design hard? And I'm curious to know, if you struggle with graphic design, take a few moments and tell me in chat, why is it that you struggle with graphic design? Why is graphic design hard for you, if you do struggle with it? Because not everybody does, but some people do. Some people are not artistic enough. Yep, I agree with that. Don't have the right eye for balance. Lou says it's expensive. That's very true. Not fast enough. Generally need special program. No training, no patience. Mary tries to do too much in design. Yes, it's interesting, Mary, while people continue typing. Graphic design is very much about stripping things out versus putting things in. Nadia, tools keep updating very quickly. I agree with that. No formal training, not artistic enough, but I'm creative. Yeah, there are tons of reasons why people struggle with graphic design. And the interesting thing about it is we all have different reasons why graphic design is hard, whether it be you don't feel artistic enough, whether you don't have the time for it, or whether the tools are too hard to learn. And I think there's a lot of different reasons why graphic design is hard that I think applies to most everybody. Not everyone, but most people. And the first one, and I think this applies to a lot of people, is I don't think most of us dreamed of being graphic designers when we were kids, right? I mean, I don't know, you might have dreamed of being an artist, but you probably didn't dream of being a graphic designer. You probably didn't dream of being an e-learning developer or a learning and development professional, or any of those things. We don't dream of being that when we grow up. I dreamed of being an actor, and I even dreamed of being a lawyer at one point, and an architect, and all these other things. But graphic designer, e-learning developer, those weren't at all things that I dreamed of growing up to be. And then the other reason, which Jenny and a few other of you mentioned, is that the tools that you use for graphic design can be either expensive, they can be hard to learn, and I think one of the big reasons when it comes to tools is, I think, and this is a struggle for graphic design, is that a lot of the tools don't set you up for success. Take PowerPoint, for example. If we look at this slide here, what is this? This is the first thing you see when you open up PowerPoint, right? And there are two different ways people look at this blank screen that you get when you open up PowerPoint. People who struggle with graphic design look at this as the restrictions in which they have to, or the boundaries in which they have to work with, right? They see, oh, I have a blank screen, I have a title placeholder, I have a subtitle placeholder, and that's all I have to work with, right? Now, on the other hand, people who are more inclined to graphic design, they don't look at this as a restriction. They look at this as a blank canvas. And that's going to be a big theme about what I'm going to be talking about as I show you how you can use PowerPoint for graphic design, is that when you start thinking of PowerPoint as any other graphic design tool, when you start looking at the slide as a blank canvas to create literally whatever you can imagine, it really opens up a whole world of possibilities that you may not have realized are there. We use tools like PowerPoint based off of what we've been told they're supposed to be used for. We're told that PowerPoint is to be used to create slides with bullet points, right? The truth is, though, PowerPoint is far more powerful than we ever give it credit for. It is a blank canvas where you can do a lot. And the truth is, a big portion of what you can do in Photoshop and a big portion of what you can do in programs like Adobe Illustrator, which are both incredibly professional graphic design tools, you can accomplish in PowerPoint for most of your needs. Obviously, there are going to be some things that you can't do in PowerPoint, but for most of them you can. And I see Joyce is very excited to be here. Good, I'm glad you're excited. So some people look at this as a blank canvas. Some people look at it as a restriction. And I really want to change your thinking, the way you think about PowerPoint. And so the tools that you might use not set you up for success. And this is another great example. Here's another screen from PowerPoint. When you add a slide for content, this is what it gives you. And what is this encouraging you to do? Well, it's encouraging you to add bullet points to the slide, to add bullet points to your screen. And that's not good design. That's not good presentations. That's not good e-learning or whatever it is you're creating. And so again, I think the tools set you up for success. So let me give you a quick scenario here, or a quick example that I think we've all ran into or experienced. Let's say it's going to be on the topic of a slide redesign. Let's say you've been tasked with creating a slide deck or a presentation or even an e-learning course. It can really be anything. And you need to build it up in PowerPoint, or you need to create it in PowerPoint. What usually happens, and whether you've experienced this, I know we all can think of somebody who has done this before, even if you haven't, is that you open up PowerPoint and you go, gosh, I need to create this presentation on human resources or something. So you open it up and you see this blank slide with the title placeholder and the subtitle placeholder. And so the first thing you do is you go out and you find some random template on the internet with some generic blue header and some generic blue footer, and you type in the title and the subtitle with the default Calibri font, and that's your presentation, right? And even if you've gone as far as just picking out a slide template or downloading it, you're already probably a few steps ahead of everyone else. And so you do this, and then you share it with your leadership, and they come back and they go, gosh, this isn't as exciting as it possibly could be. Could we, and I'm using air quotes here, and let me know if you've ever heard this before, a person in your leadership say, hey, can we jazz it up a little bit? Can we jazz it up? And so what do? You go out and you add some word art, right? You add some word art to the top, then you use some Comic Sans for the sub text, and maybe make it red to jazz it up, right? And then you take it back to your leadership and they go, gosh, that's kind of boring. That's just text, right? Can we add like some more imagery to jazz it up? And so what do? We go out and we Google some sort of clip art, and we add like this generic image of a bean person to the slide to jazz it up. And of course we have to add a bezel, because why wouldn't you add a bezel, right? We've all experienced this before, whether we've committed these crimes or whether we've seen these crimes committed. We've all done this before. And so what I want to show you how to do, the first thing I'm going to show you how to do, and I'm using the premise of this presentation. This isn't a webinar on presentation design, but I'm going to be using this as my example here. And I was just looking at some of the chat. Christy said, why wouldn't you add a bezel? I will find a way to use that in a future sentence. Very good. I agree. I'm going to show you how we can use some of the features within PowerPoint to redesign this slide using 3 really basic elements that we all probably have used before, whether it be a generic stock photo as our background. You've probably used characters if you've done any sort of e-learning design. You probably have used characters from Storyline or eLearning Brothers or eLearning Art or Captivate or wherever you get your characters from. And then, of course, what you can do with some basic shapes. And then I'll be showing you some other cool examples. So let me exit out of my presentation here. And I'm going to start by taking this image, and I'm going to use it as a background, and I'll talk about some of the things you can do to edit images. So I'm going to just copy this and paste it onto our blank slide here. And what I'm going to do, actually, let me pause for a second. I'm previewing my screen on my other monitor, and I think it's slowing down how it's streaming over to you. So give me one moment. All right. Let me know if the slide seems to be lagging for any duration of time. It might be my connection might be yours, but I'll I'll try to monitor chat for that. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this image as my background image. And this is something that I love to do, whether I'm designing an e-learning course or whether you're designing a presentation or whatever it is you're designing. Using really nice, large quality images in your background is a very, very popular design trend. And the truth is if you just find a nice enough image, you can use just about any image on your background. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this in the corner here, and I'm going to scale it up to fill up my entire slide space. Now, of course, in this instance, and Andrea asked, what is a good requirement for a clear, crisp picture? Well, really easy. There is no, I'm not going to give you a specific number or resolution, but what I would tell you is if you scale it up to fill up your entire slide and it doesn't look pixelated, if it looks good like this, then you're probably just fine. In this case, I had shrunk down the image, but you see how I scaled it up. It's a nice, clear quality image. And Joyce, the way I filled up the entire screen is I just put it in the corner, and I use my resizing handles to make the image fill up the entire screen. Does that make sense, Joyce? I just want to make sure you got your question answered before I continue. Perfect. All right. So first thing I'm going to show you some of the photo editing features that you have in PowerPoint. Now, you may or may not have noticed this, but anytime you click on and select an image or some type of media in PowerPoint, you get what's called a contextual menu up here in the ribbon. You see it says Picture Tools and Format up here in the ribbon. If I click on this, you'll notice there's a whole bunch of tools that I can use to edit this image and change the way it looks on my slide. And again, obviously you're going to be able to do a lot more editing in PowerPoint, not in PowerPoint, in Photoshop, but a lot of the basic editing features that you might want to take advantage of or you might want to use, you can accomplish in PowerPoint. For example, I'm going to be showing you in a moment how you can remove a background from an image in PowerPoint, but there's a lot of options for color correction. You can change the color of an image. There's a bunch of artistic effects, which I'll show you, and a few other things. One of the other features you have available to you are all these different frames. And one of the things I will always tell people, I say this no matter what you're doing with PowerPoint or whether you're using an e-learning authoring tool, is that just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? There are a lot of things you can do with images in PowerPoint. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? There's a lot of bad things. For example, this isn't really that nice. I mean, there might be a reason I might use this, but probably not. But some of the things that do look really nice that you might want to use, for example, this frame here. Let me shrink down my image so you can see it. I just applied, that frame to the image, and it kind of looks like a snapshot. I like that. I think that looks nice, clean, and it doesn't look too much, like it came from 1998. So there are cool frames in here that you can use depending on what you want to do with them. Here's an example of a reflection that, that's still a couple years outdated, but you can do a lot of different things with the different effects. And again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Now in this case, I'm not going to apply a border. Let me turn off the border. Actually, no, I don't remember how do I turn it. I'll just reset the image. And that's another thing to be aware of. If you make edits and you change your mind, you could of course hit undo, but you can also reset the picture, which is what I just did here. So in this case, I'm going to fill up the image to fill up the entire screen, just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some color correction and color effects. So one of the things I like to do if you're developing a course and you want to have your course match a specific theme or a color scheme is that you can apply kind of like a color overlay to the image, right? And our PowerPoint has a bunch of different ones. Of course, you can change the color saturation. And some of them, if you do it too extreme, it obviously distorts the image. This doesn't look that good, but I don't think I need to change the saturation in this. Maybe I'll desaturate it a little bit so it's not so bold. And then, of course, if I want to change the color, let me just go back here real quickly. Perhaps I want to give it, this blue overlay, just kind of like I'll do this one here to make that my background. Now in a few slides here I'll show you how we can blur this out. That's another thing I do. If I'm using a background image or an image for my background, I'll blur it out just ever so slightly so that it's not so prominent. It doesn't take, upstage the other content on my slide. But I'm pretty happy with this, just changing the hue and the color of it. One of the things I'll show you, and I'll mention this as I go through this, is that anytime you make an edit to an image or to a shape, let's say you wanted to use this image outside of PowerPoint. And the big premise of everything that I'm showing you is how can you take these features that I'm showing you to make edits and use the stuff you create outside of PowerPoint. So this edit I made to this image, if I wanted to, I could right-click and do Save as a Picture, and I can save this picture off and use it, let's say, in Storyline or whatever other program you might be using. And now I have an image here with that blue hue. So anything you create, shapes, images, anything you edit, you can save them off as images. And that even applies to grouped objects, and I'll show you that in a little bit. So let's say we wanted to use this as a background for our HR hiring policy slide that we're redesigning. The next thing I want to add is I'm going to do these characters here. So this might be a common situation. Let me just copy these over. I'll copy both of these characters over and I'll paste them here on my slide. And you might encounter this. You notice how they have that white background? This is common with characters. This might be common with any other type of imagery that you might use. And you want to be able to use this, but you don't want that white background. For some of you, you might go, gosh, well, I can't use this image. I need to go find a different image. Same thing that applied here. This is typically what you do. You add a bezel because you can't get rid of the image. So you do something like add a bezel, right? So how do you get rid of that? So there's a couple different ways you can get rid of that. Let me show you the old way, the way PowerPoint used to work, and I think this is in PowerPoint 2007 and earlier. There was one way you could remove an image. If you click on the image and go to the Picture Tools and Format tab, there was an option under the Color drop-down for Set Transparent Color. You see that option? What this option does, and this is the old way, if you're working in PowerPoint 2010 and newer, you don't need to do this, but I do want to show it for anyone's working in older versions of PowerPoint. This Set Transparent Color option, again, under the Picture Format Tools and the Color drop-down, what this does is it allows you to choose a color within your image, and what PowerPoint will do is it'll make that color, that entire color, transparent within that image. So if I select this option, you see how my cursor, well, you can't see how my cursor changes, but it changes to this little eyedropper tool. And I could choose, let's say I wanted to make this color, this white color, transparent. I'll choose that, and it sets that white color as the transparent color. And you can see it did a pretty good job in this image. Although there is some white around the edge, for the most part, it did a pretty good job. Let me do the same thing to this image. Let me do the color, set transparent color, and choose the white. Again, it did a pretty good job doing that. There are going to be instances where this works, and there's going to be instances where this doesn't work. All right? For example, let's say she was wearing a white shirt, right? If she was wearing a white shirt instead of a blue shirt, it might detect that particular color of white and get rid of it in the image and not just the background. So it's not precise, but that's one way of doing it. Let me undo that, and let me show you the correct way or the new way in which you can do this within PowerPoint. So again, here's this image. Under the Format tool, Format tab, again, this is in PowerPoint 2010 and newer, you do have this option here for Remove Background, right? And if I click on this, let me make the image a little bit bigger here so you can see what happens here. If I click Remove Background, what PowerPoint does is it scans the image, it analyzes the image, and it identifies anything that might be the background, right? And in this case, it identified the white as the background. Now, whenever you do this, I don't know why PowerPoint chooses to do this. You'll see it's cutting off his head and it's cutting off his feet. So what you have to do is you have to kind of resize this so it includes the rest of his body. Now, usually, in images like this with a white background, PowerPoint does a really, really good job of this. And just like Gina says I have mixed results with background removal. Yes, you will sometimes have mixed results. It depends on the background. It works best, this tool works best when there is a really, really clear contrast between the background and the foreground. The delineation between this character and the background is really good. So the background removal is going to be pretty sharp. However, there are images where it's not always going to be so sharp. And I'll show you an example of what you can do. There are other options to work around that. Now, the great thing, though, is you don't have to be settled. You don't have to be settled with what PowerPoint does for you. You do have tools to fine-tune what gets removed. You notice up here in the ribbon, I have mark areas to keep and mark areas to remove, right? So if I zoom in on my image, you'll notice there is still a little bit of area that I want to remove. There's this little white color right here that PowerPoint did not detect, right? And I think, Annie, you were just asking about that. So I can mark it as an area to remove, and it'll include that in the removal. If I click right there, I'll scan it, and you see how it turns it purple? It's going to remove it from the background. So you'd have to go through sometimes and go through your image to fine-tune it, to mark areas that you want to remove and mark areas you want to keep. Now, I'm pretty happy with this, so I'll say keep changes. And it looks pretty good. You notice there isn't that nasty white edge right around him. It's a much sharper image of the background removed. Let me do the same thing to the second character here. I'm going to make her a little bit bigger so we can see it. And let's say we want to remove the background from her. So also remove background. Okay. Again, it gives me this box here that I need to adjust. I don't know why it does that. I find that super annoying, but it does. And let me zoom in here. And you always want to take your time to really scan through your image to make sure it's not removing anything you don't want it to remove. And in this case, everything's looking really, really good here. There is a little bit of white in her hair, just because the contrast is a little bit more fuzzy. So let me zoom in here and let me fine-tune that. So let me mark areas to keep. Mark areas to remove. Do that. And of course, I could spend a lot more time going through this. I'm just going to do it really quickly here. Okay, I'll be happy with that. Let's say keep changes. And let me zoom back out. And again, we have our image removed, our background removed. So that's pretty nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these characters and I'm just going to put them here on the screen. I'll make them a little bit bigger. I'm going to hold Shift and select both of them. And let's make them about that big. And I'll just layer them on top of one another like that. Okay, and maybe I'll put them right here. Now the next thing I want to show you, actually I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. And this is one thing I always tell people, don't be afraid to make your characters really big. One of the things that I see, and this is a side note about characters, the use of characters, one thing I see all the time is people will use a character and they feel like they have to show the entire body on the character, or the entire body of the character on the screen. And this is something I find not necessary. You know, unless there's a reason to show the entire body, don't do it. One thing I like to do with my characters is don't be afraid to make them, you know, pretty big. You know, I could get away making them this big and putting them down here. I can even make them bigger. Let me just continue moving them around. Obviously, you want to make sure they look proportional to one another. So I'll make her a little bit bigger. I don't know why he got so much bigger than her. And I see Gina saying, if only I could convince clients of that. You know, sometimes what you have to do, Gina, is you have to show it to them. You have to just do it and show it to them and see if that works so they can see the alternative. One thing I've realized about clients is that they're really bad about envisioning what you're trying to describe. So sometimes you have to just show it to them for them to get it. Because most times, as I continue editing this, most times clients don't know what they want until you show it to them. All right. So that looks pretty good. Now, the other thing I like to do when I have layered images like this, especially when I have a background image and I have an image like this on the foreground on top of another image, is I like to add drop shadows, just so that it helps give the separation between the background and the foreground a little bit more of a pop, right? So the way to add a drop shadow, I'll click on this character first. Again, under the Format tab, we have some picture effects here, right? And there's a lot of different picture effects I can do. Shadows, reflections, glows, those awful bezels that we don't use anymore in modern design. They should really get rid of those. But I like to use shadows a lot, and creating shadows is really easy. There's several different default shadows you can choose from. And more times than not, you know, I choose to do this shadow right here from the center. And what these different options means is where the shadow is going to be casting. So you can see here it's casting a shadow in the bottom left or up here in the top right. I usually 9 times out of 10 pick a shadow that's just offset from center, so it's just going to show a shadow around the entire body. If I choose that, you can see it shows the shadow here. Now it's a little too strong, so what I can do is if I go back to my picture effects and I go down to shadow options here, I can fine-tune that shadow. Let me just bring my slide up here so we can see that. Oops, went to a different slide there. All right, so my shadow options. So I have a lot of things I can adjust with my shadow options. I can make it more transparent or less transparent. See how that's changing? So I'll make it a little bit more transparent so it's not so intense. I can change the size of it. See how it gets so much bigger and so much smaller. I don't usually play with that one too much. I maybe make it down one notch to 101%. But the blur is the other one that I do. I do transparency and blur quite a bit. So I can make it a little bit more blurred. And you see how the more blurred I make it, the less prominent it is. And then the less blur I make it, it's far more prominent. So I'll just take this to maybe about, I don't know, 18 points like that. Now that I've applied that shadow, and actually I'm going to make it a little less blurred so it shows up a little bit more. Now that I've applied that shadow, I can do the same thing to my male character here, but what I like to do is rather than taking the time to reduplicate those settings is I like to use a feature called the Format Painter in PowerPoint. If you've never used this, I highly encourage you to use it. But one of the things I can do, give me 1 second here, I'm going to crop this image a little bit so it's not overlaying on top of it. One of the things you can do is you can copy and paste the formatting from one object to another. So I applied a shadow to this image, and I can copy and paste that shadow to other images. So if I want to apply that same shadow to this character here, here's the object or the character I applied the shadow to. And if I go to my Home tab, there's this little paintbrush tool. This is the Format Painter, and if I turn this on, although you can't see it on my end, what's happened is my cursor has changed to this paintbrush. And what I can do is I can click on any other object on my slide, and it'll apply any of the formatting that was on this original image. So if I click on him, you may not have noticed it because the shadow is very subtle, but it did apply the shadow to that object. And let me hit undo, and you'll see it up here at the top of his head. If I hit undo, see it's gone, and I'll redo it, and that shadow's there now. So I don't have to go back and forth trying to duplicate those exact same settings. I could just quickly apply it. So I've done my characters, removed the background, and I have a nice background here in the background. Next thing I'm going to do is do something with these shapes. What I'd like to have is some area where I can have the title of my slide or my presentation or my e-learning course, whatever it is you're creating. I'd like to have a title for it somewhere, right? And it's usually really, really hard to apply text on top of an image like this. I'd have to blur this out, or it'd have to be an image where I have a nice big blank area to apply the title. In this case, what I'd like to do is I'm going to make kind of like a lower third banner where I can apply that text. Now, what do I see people do all the time? I see people just go insert a shape, and they apply a box here. They keep the box the default color, right? And then they enter their text here. Well, that's fine. I guess there's nothing wrong with that. But I'd like to make it, obviously, a little bit more interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a different shade of blue. Actually, I'm not going to make it blue. I'm going to make it an entirely different color. I'm going to choose, let's make it, I don't know. Does green work? No. Let's do orange. No, I don't want to do orange. We'll just do green. You know, obviously, I might take more time to be more discerning of my colors, but we'll do green. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do white. Now that I have it in my head, I'm going to do a white color. You'll see where I'm going with this in a moment. And then I'm going to turn off the shape outline as well. Now, this lower banner, okay, it's fine. But what I want to show you is how we can use the features with the PowerPoint to create custom shapes, right? Oh, Lucy, I love that. Yeah, let's do that. Actually, I'm going to choose this image, and what Lucy just suggested is why don't we pick the color in this guy's red tie? And I love that because it's going to tie in the colors that are being used within my project here. And kind of the background matches her shirt, and we'll have the banner match the tie. I love that. So what Lucy's describing is under the fill color, there's this eyedropper tool, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, Lucy, because I love this feature. And the eyedropper tool allows me to pick a color from my presentation or from anywhere and apply that for the fill color. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool, and you'll notice I'll go over my red color here, and it picks up that red color, all right, and it makes it the fill color. So I'm going to do that. And the great thing about that is let's say, let me just insert a random picture here. Let's say we wanted to use, we're just going to play pretend, and let's say this image is our company logo, right? And I wanted to use this orange color for my background. I could use my eyedropper tool and select that orange color, okay? Now, I see we do have a question from Michelle. Michelle asks, is this only in 2013? I'm in 2010, and I don't see the eyedropper. You know what? I'm not sure about that, Michelle. It might be a 2000. I'm surprised. I think it would have been in 2010. Does anyone else know by chance? And Michelle, it would be under the fill color and eyedropper. Does anyone else have PowerPoint 2010 who might be able to answer? Okay, so it's a 2013 only feature. Got it. Not in 2010. Got it. All right. So we've applied the fill color. And Michelle, you use that all the time in Storyline. And if you wanted to, Michelle, if you really wanted to use that red color, you could drop this into Storyline, use the eyedropper tool, and capture the RGB values and enter those in there as well. You can enter the RGB values there to put in that color if you really, really wanted to, or any other tool that allows you to capture those values. All right, so what I want to show you is how we can make this shape a little bit more interesting. There's nothing wrong with this rectangle, but I do want to make it more interesting. And this is where I'm going to be transitioning into how you can use PowerPoint to create custom shapes. Use PowerPoint to do vector shapes. And this is stuff that you might have assumed. Oh, and you guys are mentioning Snagit. I use Snagit for that as well. Good observation. But you can actually create and edit vector shapes within PowerPoint. So here's my shape. I'm under my drawing tools and format. And there's this option way over here called Edit Shape. And you'll notice there's some options. I can change the shape, do a different shape, or I can do this option called Edit Points, right? And if I click on this, you'll notice the corners of my shape change to these different handles. And these are called Bezier curves. And if I click on this, I can edit these Bezier curves. For example, if I click on this top left corner, I get two handles here. One to the bottom and one to the side. And notice what happens when I click and move these. You see how it's changing the shape, literally changing the shape of my what used to be a square. Now I'm making a custom shape. So if I wanted to make kind of like a wave graphic, I can bring that up. Take this one, maybe make this come down a little bit, right? Like that. And literally edit the shape. And once I click away, now that's my new shape. And let me just bring it down here a little bit. And now I have a shape, all right? A custom shape. Used to be a rectangle. And again, all I have to do is select the image, go to the Format tab, Edit Shape, and do Edit Points. And it allows you to edit the points. I'll show you in a few slides other ways I've used this, because this is a really powerful feature in PowerPoint. Now this red color is pretty strong. So what I'm going to do, this is another thing I do, I like to layer shapes and graphics on top of one another. And I recently read a quote, it was on LinkedIn or something, and I really liked it because it really speaks true to how most graphic designers work. Usually when I'm designing something, I move things around on the screen until they look good. And that couldn't be more true. So if you're struggling to figure out what looks good, just move it around until you figure out what looks good. Eventually it'll look good. So I'm just going to copy and paste this shape. I'll paste it here on the screen. And I'm just going to shrink it down, make it a little smaller than the one in front of it. And I'm going to give it a white fill, just so it's a little bit different. Like that. All right? And we kind of have a wave graphic. Adrienne, yes, I will be emailing this out as well. By the end of the day, it'll be in your email, the recording. Thank you. No problem. All right. So I'm also going to, now that I've created those two custom shapes, I'm also going to add drop shadows to those as well, just to give, again, a little bit more of a contrast between the background and the foreground. So again, under my shape effects over here, I do have the option for shadow. I'm just going to apply that center shadow there as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these characters to the front. Now, one thing I want to show you, this is a really powerful feature in PowerPoint that I use all the time, and it's totally hidden in plain sight. And for some of you, this literally will probably change your life. You remember, like, if you remember the first time you got a second monitor hooked up to your computer, like a dual monitor, and how that changed your life, this is one of those features that might literally change your life, and it's called the selection pane. And one of the things that you might struggle with, or one of the things that I know I used to do all the time in PowerPoint, is let's pretend there was something about this character I needed to edit, right? Well, I might do a couple of things. Let me just go over some of the common things you might do. You might go right-click and bring it to front, right? Make your edits, and then send it back to the back. Oh, it goes all the way behind here, so I'll send this to the back to put it back in its original position, right? We've all done that. Or you might do something like this, where you move this item out of the way, and then move this item out of the way, and then come over here and make your edit to the character, right? And then move these items back so that they're in their original position, right? And let me just fix this. We've all done that before. The other one, this is my favorite, and let me know whether or not you've done this. Again, let's say we needed to edit something behind these, but we wanted to make sure they were back in their exact same location. Let me know if you've ever done this, where you've done this. You've counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 to move something out of the way, make the edit, and then count back up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We've all done that, right? Well, the selection pane is going to solve that. And Michelle, I'll be honest, I still do it sometimes as well. I'll gladly admit it. So the selection pane, let me show you what this is and how it works. So if you're under the Home tab, and again, I believe this is in PowerPoint 2013. I know it's in 2013 because that's what I'm in. I believe it's in PowerPoint 2010, so anyone else in PowerPoint 2010, please confirm for me. Under the Home tab, there's this option for Select. And thank you so much, Gina. And down here, there's this selection pane, right? And I click on this, it opens up this little tab or this little panel on the side of my screen. And there's a couple things I can do here. Let me take you back to my original scenario. Let's say I needed to make an edit to this character. Well, I have these two shapes in the way. So what I can do is I can actually hide them. These are little eyeballs. I can hide them. I'll even hide my character here. I can make whatever edits I needed to make to this. And then I can unhide those objects, just like that. That's really cool. So I can hide anything on my slide that I need to hide. And then I can show all. That's pretty cool. The other thing I can do is I can also rename these items. And Michelle, you probably, and for those of you using Storyline or Captivate, you do this in the timeline all the time, right? You probably didn't realize that PowerPoint had a feature like this. So let me show you what else you can do. You can also rename these items, just like you can in Storyline and PowerPoint. So let's say I wanted to rename this rectangle. I'll call it my lower third. This rectangle is also a lower third. This picture is my female character. Can't type today. This guy is my male character. And of course, this background is my background. So I can rename these. Pretty cool. I can also rearrange the stacking order of these items on the screen. So what you used to have to do is right-click, bring to front or send to back. I can actually change, I believe I can change the stacking order here. Let me verify I can do that before I say I can. So let's say I wanted to bring my characters to the front. Yep, there we go. I can bring them to the front and reorder them, change the stacking order, just like that. And Linda Ann, you said, I'm not sure why when you would hide elements. Can you provide an example? Yes, let me provide an example. Let's say I was creating a presentation where I had some different items of text layered on top of one another. Let's say this is my main point 1, main point 2, main point 3, right? And let's say these were all on top of one another because let's say I'm going to animate them in and out. So let me align these up so they're all on top of one another, right? And let's say I decided, oops, I need to edit main point 1. Well, they're all stacked on top of one another. So how do I edit main point 1? Well, in the past, you probably had to go move main point 3 and main point 2 out of the way so you can see and edit main point 1, right? And then you'd have to take these and move them back into their original position where they were. What the selection pane allows me to do is I can hide these items so I can edit one of them at a time. So let me hide main point 3 and main point 2, and now I can edit main point 1 and say something different, and then unhide the other two. So I don't have to move anything around. Does that make sense, Linda Ann? Perfect. So great question from Michelle. Michelle asks, in Storyline, you can lock stuff to keep from editing. In PowerPoint, you hide it. Right. Unfortunately, you can't lock items in PowerPoint. You can only hide it and change the stacking order and rename them there. Right. Let me hit undo so I can not forget what was supposed to be here. Give me one moment. All right. but I went back too far. Let me just delete that. All right, so we have a much better looking slide here. Now, of course, with the text, let me just go ahead and add my text to the screen. You know, one of the things about PowerPoint, and Nadia says, I think you can lock the animation. You know what? I'm not sure about that either under the animation pane. Let me look into that. Let's just add an animation, do the animation pane. I don't believe there's an option to lock it. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to look into that. That's a good question. Let me remove that animation. All right, so the next thing I'm going to add, now that I showed you the selection pane, we did a custom shape, we did our background, removed the background from our characters, is some text stuff. Now, one of the things about PowerPoint is, of course, PowerPoint still incorporates word art. I'll be honest with you, I can't think of a situation when I would ever use any of these. Word art is something that is if you're thinking about from a graphic design perspective, it's something that's very out of date. So I usually work off of text boxes, and one of the things that I do quite often is I use multiple text boxes. You know, if I were to use the same title, you know, HR hiring policies and this subtitle, it's very common for people to put those in the same text box. They would just do a hard return and change, you know, this to a different font size. I tend to work in two different text boxes. I'd put this in its own dedicated text box and the subtext in its own dedicated text box. And the reason why that is it gives me more control over the placement and formatting of my text. So let me do my title. Let me come back here. I'll insert a text box, and I'll show you some stuff you can do with text. So let's say the title is HR hiring policies. Okay. I'll choose a nice font. While I'm on the topic of fonts, stay away from Comic Sans. I'd also say stay away from the default fonts. Try to choose something interesting. Let's just do, I'll just do this Moon font that I have installed. Make it a little bit larger. One of the things I like to do is adjust the what's called the kerning or the character spacing. So you can make it kind of loose, make it tight, so it spreads it out a little bit more. Maybe I'll make it bold, and then I'll just copy and paste this and make a sub. We'll just call it best practices, right? Maybe change it so it's not all bold. Maybe make it a little bit smaller and change it to red. So, you know, again, starting where we started from, yeah, not too good. Is this amazing? No, but it is much better, and it gets you a sense of some of the tools that I used, from changing the photo, removing backgrounds, and creating custom shapes. So let's continue with that. Let me show you some other things you can do with custom shapes. So here's another example of a very common slide you see in Storyline or in PowerPoint. You know, you have that generic background, we have some bullet points. We didn't know what else to do with the screen, so of course we added this clip art and added a reflection to it. We've all seen that before, right? The clip art to jazz it up. So let me show you how I might redesign this slide, sticking with our original theme. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy my image, and I'll paste it here. And one of the things I wanted to show you that I love doing with images, and sometimes this, depending on the quality of your image, this can slow down your computer a little bit, just because it takes a lot of processing power, so I'm hoping it won't do that to me today. But one of the things I like to do if I'm using an image as a background is I like to blur the image a little bit. And I use this all the time if I want to use a blurred image, let's say in Storyline, and I can show you an example of when I do this. I come into PowerPoint all the time to blur out an image. So under Artistic Effects, you see there's this one loading here. This is the blurred effect, and I'll apply it, and you can see it blurs out the image. And I can also, if I come back to Artistic Effects, let me see if it's going to show me the options here. Not sure why it's not doing that. Give me one moment. There we go. Artistic Effect options. Where is it? Nope. Oh, here, down here. I apply the blur, and this is a great example where it's not working for me. But what I do is you get a nice little control where you can control the intensity of the blur if you wanted to. In this case, I'll just go with the default blur. But those artistic effects, there would be more options here. You could control the intensity of the blur to make it more blurred or less blurred. So let's say that's going to be our background. I'll just go ahead and pick one of my characters. I'll just choose her, copy and paste her over. And now what do we do about these bullet points here? One of the things that I've come to realize is that sometimes there's no way to avoid bullet points, right? Sometimes you have to have bullet points It really comes down to what do you do with the bullet points to communicate them on the screen. And I actually have a really good blog post on this. I'll share the link with it. I'll show you the link at the end. But how can we use these bullet points to make them a little bit more interesting? And there's a couple different ways. If you have to keep your bullet points, one of the things you can do is, change your bullet points into like a checklist or something different. Later on, I'll show you how you can change your bullet points into like custom icons. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to create a custom checklist graphic here using custom shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a square here. And I know I'm going kind of fast here because our time just flies by. And I'm going to create, let's say we wanted to make a notepad graphic. Get rid of the outline. Let's do kind of this notepad fill color here. And, that obviously we're starting to look like a notepad, but I want to make it look even more like a notepad. Like I want to make it look like it's actually been torn out of a notebook. So one of the things you can do is you can do this, and I'll show you how. I'm going to add some circles here. I'm just going to make some little circles here, and I'm going to put them where you normally have like a 3-ring binder, kind of like this. It's not going to be perfect. Obviously, I'd spend more time doing it perfectly. And let's say we wanted it to make it look like these were punched out from this notepad. Well, I can select all of these shapes here, just like this. And under my Format tools, under Merge Shapes, and again, this is in PowerPoint 2013. If anyone can confirm if it's in 2010, please do so and put that into chat. But you see I have these different options for editing the shape. I can union, it'll make it all one shape. I can combine, I can fragment, intersect, or subtract. And you notice if I do subtract, what it essentially does is it takes those circles and cuts them out, kind of punches out that shape through my original shape. So I do that, and now I have a custom shape that looks like a notepad graphic, right? And if I wanted to, I can do a shape effects, maybe add a shadow to it. I'll create another one, maybe just do something like this to layer it on top of each other. If I wanted to take time to add some lines, I can do that. And now we have some, custom notepad shapes. Let me show you other ways that I've used this to create custom shapes and icons. And this is where you really get into the cool features of PowerPoint. So let me open up some files here. One of the things that I've spent a lot of time doing is creating custom icons that you can use in e-learning courses and PowerPoints and presentations. And this presentation or this PowerPoint slide here, all of these custom icons that you see here, these were 100% created using shapes within PowerPoint. So let's say, I really like this rocket shape. Notice if I click, they're grouped right now. I can ungroup them. I'll continue ungrouping it because it's in a bunch of different groups. You can see these are all just basic shapes put together to create this custom icon here, right? So let's say in this case, I wanted to create, a custom icon for whatever, Creating icons is simple. You start with a background shape. Let's say this is my background. We'll give it a, this normal blue color fill. Give it no outline. And whatever I want to do with the different shapes, we can create different different icons. Let's say I wanted to create like a check mark. Well, I can create that using, 2 rectangles. We'll do kind of a flat design with the rounded corner. I'll copy and paste it. Maybe put it down here in the corner, make it a little taller. And then I can do is I can go back here to my Merge Shapes Union. It'll make it one single shape. Do a shape fill of maybe green, no outline. Turn it on its axis, kind of like this, and put it in there. And that green doesn't look very well. Maybe we'll do white. Obviously, I'm doing that really quickly here, but before you know it, we have a custom icon. If I wanted to make this a little bit more interesting, I'll make another shape. Maybe do this black fill as a background, send it to the back, and put it right below it, kind of like that, and we have a custom icon. Now I can take this, group it together, right? And if I right-click and save as a picture, we can say this is my checkmark icon. Save it to my desktop, minimize this, and now I have a checkmark image that I can use outside of PowerPoint wherever I want. So that's really cool. And while on that topic, you can do that with those characters as well. I remove the background here. Doesn't mean you have to keep these in PowerPoint. I can right-click and save this as a picture. And let's say I want to use this character, right? Save it off. It saves it as a PNG image. And now I don't know why it squished it there, but You can see here it's saved as an image and it has a transparent background. And I can take this and use it in Storyline or whatever you're using it in Word document, wherever. So you can create custom icons, custom vector shapes, save those off. One of the other things you can do in PowerPoint is you can actually use PowerPoint to create hand-drawn graphics. So you see all these graphics, they look like they were drawn by hand. That's because they were, and they're completely editable. I can change the color, the shape fill of them. Let me figure out that, here it is, the color drop down. And see if it changes it. And I can change these, and I can save these off. So if I wanted to, I can save this off and use it. And you might be wondering, well, how did I create these in PowerPoint? So one of the cool things you can do is if you buy one of these, like these Wacom tablets here, this is just a simple Wacom tablet. I bought this for $60. One of the cool things you may not realize is when you plug that into your computer, what PowerPoint gives you, let me open this up, is there's actually a tab or whole options for ink tools. And I don't have my tablet with me, but it will allow you to draw on your slide. So I drew all of these in PowerPoint. And so if I wanted to create some hand-drawn speech bubbles or icons or whatever, you could take these, edit their color, and save them off and use them literally wherever you want. So here's some, hand-drawn arrows that you can use. That's pretty cool. The last thing I want to show you, and this is another cool thing on the topic related to icons, and I do this all the time, is how you can transform text into a shape. All right, and there's a lot of different reasons you might want to do this. You can create custom icons. You can also, let's say you're sharing a PowerPoint presentation where the people don't have that font installed. You can do this. But let's say this is something I do all the time. Let me insert a text box, right? And let's say I wanted to make a question mark icon. So I'll just type in a question mark. And if you were like me, I would probably take this text box and let me just highlight this and make this super big, right? And give it a white fill or white out. Make the font white. Let me duplicate this and get rid of this check mark. Bring this to the front. And there I have an icon. All right, that's pretty cool. You've probably done that before. But I don't want this to be font anymore. Let's say I wanted to make it an actual editable shape, just like any other shape in PowerPoint. I can transform this into an editable vector shape that I can edit in PowerPoint. And let me show you how. Let me take this back to black so that you don't have to use text boxes like that anymore. And I'm just going to copy and paste this blue circle here. What you can do is if I take this text and I bring it to the front and I put it on top of here, putting on top of a shape, and I select both of them, I can go back to my Format tab, and there's this Merge Shapes feature I was showing you earlier. And if I do this option for Fragment, what it's going to do is it's going to take that text and that literal font and text and punch through the shape. So I fragment it. And now I can delete anything I don't want, so I don't need this background circle. And now it's created a shape out of that text. So I can take this, I'll group it together, I'll just do a Control-G. And now I have an editable shape, and of course I'm distorting it here. But it's just like any other shape in PowerPoint. Okay? And I can even go to Edit Shapes and edit the points of the shape if I wanted to change it. But it's literally created a shape out of that. And I'll show you where I use this. You can use it if you want to create shapes out of any of, a question mark or a symbol. But what I would encourage you to do is if you open up and insert a shape and go back to Insert and do a symbol here, what this does is it finds all the different symbols that you have in your font library. And one of the ones that you probably have is you have wingdings, right? We all have wingdings. See all these different symbols that you have? And let's say we wanted to create an icon for, let me just find one that's interesting here. Actually, let me do webdings because that tends to be more interesting. Let's do this globe. Okay, so it inserts that there. I'll make it a little bit bigger, right? And again, just like I did before, bring this to the front. I'll put it in front of that. I'll select both of them, go to my Merge Shapes and Fragment, and delete the stuff I don't want. So I don't want the oceans in there. Obviously, I've spent some time there. But now I have an icon that I can edit and change the color of. Shape fill, if I want to make it orange. Okay? And now that I'm mentioning this, there are tons and tons and tons of free fonts out there that you can download that are literally just wingdings. So one of them that I downloaded, if I insert a symbol, it's a font that's called, let me find it, starts with an F, B, C, D, E, F, G. Font Awesome. It's literally a bunch of different wingdings and dingbats that you can use to create different icons. So here's that checkmark icon, right? I'll insert that into my text box. I can keep it as text if I wanted to. I could use it as a custom bullet point if I wanted to. Or, just like what I was creating earlier, if I wanted to create a custom icon, bring this to the front, lay it on top of it, edit shape, fragment, delete the stuff I don't need anymore. Oops, that's not what I want to delete. I want to delete the checkmark part. All right, and now I have a more custom icon that I created from scratch. So you can do that in PowerPoint. So in the last couple minutes that we have, I'll point you to a couple of resources, and I'll include these with the recording. Of course, the Wacom tablets. There's a couple posts on the eLearning Uncovered blog. If you come to blog and just search PowerPoint, I have a whole how-to video on how to create custom icons in PowerPoint, and I actually, that PowerPoint file that I had opened earlier with all these icons, you can actually download these for free from the eLearning Uncovered blog, so you can download these icons in PowerPoint, do what you want with them. There's a whole how-to video on that. If you're looking for just generic PowerPoint design tips, I have another post on that with another video on different design tips. And again, those hand-drawn graphics, you can come and download that file as well and use all these hand-drawn graphics from the blog. And then we have another post. This is one Diane Elkins did on how to create this magnifying glass effect using the features in PowerPoint. So I'll include links to these in the archive post. But that is our webinar on PowerPoint for graphic design.
Hey, did you like that video? Make sure to check out some of our other great content at elearninguncovered.com.